Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to take a basic sleeve block and changing it into 4 different sleeve variations. We're going to look at sleeves that have fullness on the top and no fullness on the bottom, fullness on the bottom and no fullness on the top, a leg of mutton sleeve, and a puff sleeve. Now I'm completing these all with a size 8 sloper block. So this is relatively small, but you can use this entire process for any kind of sleeve that you know fits you. I do not show how to actually sew the sleeves, but I do walk you through how to create the pattern. There are lots of different tutorials out there on how to sew in gathered sleeves and how to fit a sleeve into an armhole. It just seemed like it was going to be too clunky of a video to include the sewing in here. So without further ado, let's get into working with some sleeves. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to take our basic dress sloper sleeves. So this is a sloper sleeve that is closely fitted to the wrist. This is in a size 8 or so. So this is a little bit small. It's a dress size 8. You can see when I fold this together how narrow the sleeve is when it is done. I'm going to show you how to turn this sleeve into 4 different patterns with different fullness and different spots. So what I've gone ahead and done is made 4 copies of this pattern out of some brown paper. For this, you are going to need a ruler. A straight ruler is fine. If you have a French curve, that will also be helpful, but it is not 100% necessary. You are going to need some Scotch tape, a pen or pencil, and some scrap paper. I'm going to be using some more brown paper and also some scraps of white paper so that you can see the difference between what my brown paper is and the paper that I'm going to be adding for the patterns. So to start off, I'm going to first show you how to make a bell-shaped sleeve from this pattern. So a bell-shaped sleeve has the standard amount of ease on the top edge of the pattern at the arm's eye. This pattern has 5/8 of an inch ease built into it already, and it is eased between these 2 notches. What we're going to be doing is adding flare to this sleeve. Now we want to keep the length of the top of the cap the same, but we're going to be adding to the bottom of the sleeve. So what we're going to do is use the slash and spread method to add fullness to this sleeve. Now what we're going to do first is to take our ruler and draw vertical lines from each of these 3 notches down to the bottom of this hem. Now I do want to make sure that I'm making these nice and straight. So to help me with this, I'm going to give myself a horizontal line first so that I can use my ruler to give me 90-degree angles. So first I'm going to connect a line across the bicep, which is the bottom of this arm's eye to the other. Like that. Now I'm going to use my ruler and draw a line from the center, where my top notch is, all the way down to the bottom of the hem. Now my ruler is a little bit short, so I'm going to grab my longer one. Use my bicep line to help me get this nice and straight. And then draw a line from top to bottom. Like this. I'm going to draw another line from this notch down to the bottom. Again, making sure that it is straight. And then finally, one more from this notch down to the bottom. Like so. So I have broken this sleeve up into sections. They're not evenly broken up, which is okay for what we're doing for this particular pattern alteration. So now I have these lines drawn in here. We are going to cut this pattern from the bottom where the hem of the sleeve is up towards the top of this notch, but we're going to stop right before we get to the very end. We want to leave the paper attached, so we're not going to cut all the way through. We're cutting to, but not through this notch. So grab a pair of paper cutting scissors. Do not use your fabric scissors for this. You do not want to dull your beautiful fabric scissors. So these are just some craft scissors I have on hand. So two, but not through. So we're leaving this with a little bit attached. We're going to do the same thing for both of these lines. So up through the bottom to the top, leaving it attached at the top of the sleeve. All right, so now my sleeve has cut pieces to it. So to add fullness to the bottom of this, we are going to spread this pattern out like this. Now, depending on how full you want it to be, you're going to have to make up for the space that's in here. So we are going to need to put paper underneath this so that we can retrace this pattern. Now you can make it very subtle so that you have a little tiny bit of flare, or you can even go almost straight out and across that top edge where it looks more and more like a circular shape as you keep spreading this out. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to add about, I'll say about 3 or 4 inches in between each section. So I have a flared sleeve that's bell-shaped, but not circular. So now I'm going to get myself some paper that I'm going to stick under this pattern, and then we will tape this down. All right, so now my paper is entirely taped down. So I'm going to trace the outline of this pattern onto this paper. Then I will be able to remove this later so that I have a brand new beautiful pattern so I don't have to keep all this stuff taped down permanently. So I'm going to go in and trace the top edge. Mark in where my notches are supposed to sit. So it's important that I still know where these are. I will have to go in and trace the spots that I've taped the edge. Now I'm going to just mark the bottom of the brown paper here. I'm not going to connect this up yet. Now, if you wanted to leave this as a full flared sleeve and have it just be draped while the wearer is wearing it, you can go ahead and connect these lines. If you want to have a little bit more fullness to it, you can bring the bottom line down a little bit right in the middle. So rather than like connecting this with, you know, a straight line here, a straight line here, a straight line here, instead what I'm going to do is add about 1 inch to the bottom, right in here. And then I'm going to blend a curve to the outer edges. So you can use a curved ruler for this. If you do not have a curved ruler, you can kind of eyeball in a nice curve. Now what you want to do is make sure that you're not making it much longer on the outside edges because these need to sew together, so you want these lengths to be the same. The rest of this pattern is unchanged from the original pattern. So now that I've traced it in, I can go in and remove the brown paper version. Make sure that I true up any of these lines that didn't get traced because of the tape. And make sure that my notches are on the interior of my pattern. And then finally draw a grain line down the center of my sleeve. Now this would be set into the armhole just like you would set in a normal sleeve, and then the bottom edge would be left open and free and billowy. Now if you wanted this to have a gathered cuff on the bottom, you can use this exact same pattern, but sew in gathering stitches along the bottom edge right here and gather it to a rectangular cuff. So here I have a sleeve that has been left open and free. And here I have one that has been gathered into a rectangular cuff. So for this next sleeve, I'm going to show you how to do a sleeve that has a lot of fullness on the top half and no fullness on the bottom edge. We're going to make this a 3/4 sleeve. So this is going to come down about this far or so. And then we're going to spread this upper edge out, and that's going to give us a lot of fullness on the top, and it's going to fit close to the arm on the bottom. So to start this off, we are going to need our bicep line. So I'm going to draw this in, connecting edge to edge. And then I'm going to measure down. I'm going to fold this up kind of where I want the length of my sleeve to be. We'll make it about this long. Give myself a measurement here that I can use as reference. It's about 6 inches. So I'll measure down 6 inches from that bicep line. Connect this across. Now I can cut this lower half of my sleeve off. Now, just like what we did for the bell sleeve and for the gathered sleeve, we are going to make these vertical lines coming from these notches down to the hem. So use my ruler, make sure I'm drawing a straight line up and down. All right, so you can add more vertical lines to help you slash and spread this even further. However, if you are going to be adding additional lines, when you get about 2 inches or so from the bottom of the arm's eye, you don't really want to be adding too much fullness under here. This part is what sits underneath your arm, like in your armpit, so you don't want to be gathering up fabric in that space because it's going to be really bulky and uncomfortable for your wearer. So generally, I try to only add fullness between like this area of my sleeve because this is what's outside of the boundary of your armhole, so, or your armpit. So it's not going to be stuffed underneath your arm. So that's why I like to kind of maintain what's happening on this curvy spot of the armhole. Now for this design, we want fullness on the top and no fullness on this bottom edge. So we're going to cut from the notches to this edge, but not through it. So for these 3 lines, we're going to come down to this hem, but making sure that we don't separate the paper from this edge. If you accidentally cut it through all the way, just try to go in and tape that back in as best as you can. So now we're going to slash through these lines. So my paper that I'm using right now, this one is just standard butcher block paper. This paper is actually flooring paper that I picked up at Lowe's. It's an enormous roll for about 15 to 20 bucks, and it goes a long, long way. You do have to kind of flatten it out when it comes off the roll, but for the price and for the thickness of it, I really like it for patterning. It is a little bit hard to fold it up and store it, but for like keeping things and altering stuff as you're working, this stuff is really nice, and it's inexpensive, which is my favorite part. So now we're ready to spread this out. So I'm gonna, again, just try to limit this to about a couple of inches in between each one. Again, you can spread this out like really, really far. And then the more you spread it out, the more curved this bottom edge becomes. We'll do a really extreme curved one for the leg of mutton sleeve, which will be the next one I'll show you. Straighten this out a little bit so you can see better. All right, so let's do a couple of inches in between each one. And you see I've accidentally split that one, so I'm going to tape this down first. Again, I'm going to remove this pattern later, so I'm not going to use a ton of tape. Just enough so that it doesn't shift around on me. All right. So now I can trace this bottom edge. We're not going to make any changes to this line right here and the two underarm seams. Now I am going to trace this section because I don't want this to change shape. I'm going to trace this section. And now, just like what we did with the short puffed sleeve, we're going to draw in a new curve line here, adding just a little bit of height up here. This time I'm going to make it about 3/4 of an inch taller, so about here. And I can use my curved ruler to kind of help draw in a new line. So use your curved ruler in increments. You're not going to find a perfect, happy curve right from the get-go. So this, I put just a little bit more height to the back end than to the front so that I have a little bit more height on the back end of my sleeve. I could also, if I wanted to, like blend this more out to here, if I wanted to keep it even throughout the entire thing. I kind of like this line a little bit better. Don't be afraid to redraw lines. Ideally, you should do this in pencil, but honestly, pencil doesn't really show up on camera very well, so I'm doing this in pen. So you will want to put in notches. For this, I'm going to put my notches kind of in between the two big sections here. So this is my single notch, and then I have my double notch here. And then find the middle and draw in your center notch. Now you can take all this off. Indicate in here that you need to gather this edge. And it will have to fit into the arm's eye. Now this bottom edge is going to stay exactly as it is. Make sure that you have drawn in these two underarm sections and that you put a grain line in the middle of your pattern. Now when this one sews up, you have a lot of fullness on the top half of the sleeve, so then it tapers down to almost nothing on the lower edge of the sleeve. So the arm that I have this sleeve in is definitely too big for the sleeve that I've made, so you can see that it looks really tight here, but you can get an idea of what that final silhouette looks like. So you have this fullness up here, and then it fits close to the arm on the lower half. So if this were on a smaller arm, you would definitely get more height here, and more billowiness a little bit right in here. So you can see this is where the upper edge of the sleeve cup has been gathered in. And then we have this nice clean edge where our facing sits. Now for this next sleeve, I'm going to show you how to do a short sleeve with a puffy bottom and top edge to them. Now, if you wanted to do a sleeve that had a puffy bottom edge to it, and it wasn't puffy on the top, you would use the same process of doing the bell sleeve, except you would cut your sleeve short before you start adding in the flare lines. So then it would be gathered in, you know, about elbow level or higher. You can make it pretty much whatever length you'd like, but the process for adding the flare on the bottom is the same. For this demo, I'm going to show you how to do a short sleeve that is puffy on the bottom where the elastic or binding is, and gathered on the top so that you have fullness where the arm's eye sits. So with this one, we're first going to determine how long of a sleeve that we want. So this line right here that goes across from bottom of the arm's eye to bottom of the arm's eye, this is your bicep line. So when you are looking at your sleeve, this is about where the bottom of the armpit sits. So this should help you with realizing how long this sleeve should be. I'm going to make my sleeve about, let's do about 3 inches from the bicep line. So this hits down in here. So I'm going to measure 3 inches down across the bicep. and then draw a horizontal line where I'm going to cut this off. So now I can separate this pattern. So now I have my standard short sleeve version here. So we are going to add fullness to the bottom edge and to the top edge here. So just like when we did the other sleeve, the bell sleeve, we're going to add the vertical lines from the 3 notches to the hem. So 1, 2, and 3. Now this time, instead of slashing from the bottom and stopping at the top, we're going to separate these completely so that we have 4 separate pieces. So there are my 4 separate pieces. Now we are going to tape these onto another piece of paper, and we're going to blend a line across the top and across the bottom. So the more you spread this out, the fuller your sleeve is going to be. So you will want to have this in mind when you are taping this back together. So the more spread out you do it, the more you're going to have to gather your fabric back in. So if you are using a very lightweight fabric, like a lightweight chiffon, an organza, a voile, something very soft that can be gathered up really tightly, you can spread this out more and have a larger sleeve. If you are working with a fairly stiff and heavy weight material, you can't really gather an enormous sleeve like this easily into a tiny armhole without making pleats or other kinds of modifications to this sleeve. For the purposes of this project, we are using medium weight woven fabrics. So I would say don't go any more than like 2 or 3 inches between each section, and that'll give you a pretty good puffy effect. The other area to this is that you can have more fullness on one end than the other. So if you still wanted gathering on both sides, but you wanted it super full on the bottom, you can angle this like that so that you still have gathering happening here, but you have more happening here. So this is an uneven amount of gathering added to the top and bottom. So this might be helpful for stiffer fabrics where you can't really quite fit everything up at the arm's eye, but you can make pleats into a cuff on the bottom end. For this demonstration, I'm going to make them an even amount of gathering. So now I'm going to need another piece of paper to put underneath this. One tip that I have for making these nice and even is to first draw a horizontal line on your paper before you start laying your pieces back down. This allows you to line up that bicep line. Oh, I drew it a little bit high. Let's flip it over. So that horizontal line can help you with taping these back down. So I have this one here. I'll take this down. I can measure across, let's do 1.5 inches. That's actually 2 inches. Then I can tape the next one down. Measure over another 2 inches. Tape this one down. All right. So now we have to do some blending of these lines. Now, if you just drew straight across here and came like exactly to this area right here, what you end up with is a sleeve that has gathers on top and bottom, but it doesn't have much puff to it. What happens is that the gathers kind of sit close to the edge of the arm. So what you need is to add a little bit of height to the cap and a little bit of height to the bottom edge of this so that there's a little bit of poof or hangover when the gathering happens. This gives you that volume that kind of sprouts off of your arm. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to trace the armhole for this first piece and the last piece. So these are not going to change shape at all. And then I'm going to blend and draw a new line that comes about an inch above where my initial height of my cap was. Like this. And then blend in a new curved line. So this adds a little bit of height to the cap of my sleeve. The notches will be in the same location. I can actually put this one right in the middle instead. And about here. Let's say here. Since we're going to be gathering up this sleeve, notch placement, as long as you're in that same kind of area. Here I'm not 100% in the middle, but I'm close. Then for the bottom edge, I'm going to come down about 1/2 inch. And blend this line here. Again, you can use a curved ruler for this, but I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. And I can go in with my curved ruler and make that line a little prettier. So now that I have this all drawn in, I can remove the brown paper. Oops, make sure you draw in your side of your armhole, side of your sleeve, which I did not do. Then you can take these pieces off. Your grain line is going to run vertically in the middle of the sleeve. And I want you to put little stars here and here where your notches are and label this gather. You also need to gather this bottom edge into a cuff of some kind. So let's draft a cuff to put into this. Now it is helpful that you know about how big to make the cuff. So this is the bottom half of the sleeve that I cut off. I can use this length as a guide for my cuff piece. So this length is about 12 inches. So we're going to make a cuff that's about 12 and a half. This will give us just a little bit more room. So I'm going to just draw this on another section of this paper. So let's make a 12 and a half inch rectangle. And I'm going to make this cuff 2 inches wide. That'll give me enough for a fold over and seam allowance. So in the middle, I'm going to put a fold line here. And I'm going to give this 1/2 inch seam allowances. And add the 1/2 inch seam allowance here. So that is my cuff pattern. So it is going to end up being a 1/2 inch sized cuff on the bottom, and that sleeve will get gathered into this. So here is our puff sleeve all sewn up. Now again, my arm form here is definitely not made for the size of the cuff, but if you were putting this on a much more petite arm, you could see more of this fullness here. So our gathering is concentrated on the outside edge of the arm. We don't have it happening under here because you don't want that. You want this to be nice and kind of smooth and comfortable on the back side. The fullness, again, can be distributed more towards the back side if you'd like, so you have like more back here. But this gives you a good idea of just how much fullness you can get with that puff sleeve. Now, if you wanted this to stick out really big and round, you could stuff it with something. Here, I've just made this out of muslin, so you can kind of see how squishy it is. If you were using something like a chiffon or a organza, this would be really poofy, and you can even make the sleeve piece much bigger so that you get more of a rounded kind of globe poof. So that is our short puff sleeve gathered on top and bottom. So the final sleeve design that I'm going to show you today is a Lego mutton sleeve. A Lego mutton sleeve has a lot of fullness on the top half, and then it tapers down and fits closely to the wrist on the bottom edge. This is a very dramatic looking sleeve, and it does have a lot of fullness on the top. The pattern does have a bit more alteration than the previous ones that we've done, but a lot of the concepts are very similar. What we want to do first is establish where we want the sleeve to start getting tighter on the arm. So our Lego mutton sleeve actually is going to start having fullness at elbow level, and then it tapers thinner from the elbow to the wrist. So we need to find the elbow level on our sleeve, and that's going to hit about halfway between the bicep and the hem. So I'm going to start by first drawing in my bicep line. Measuring from the bicep to the bottom of the hem, it's about 15.5. So I'm going to do about 7 and 3/4. And then draw a horizontal line going across. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we are going to only be slashing and spreading on the upper half of this sleeve and leaving the rest of this exactly as it is. So this is going to require a little bit more cutting. We're going to cut vertically and horizontally to get this shape. So next we're going to draw in our vertical slash lines from our notches down just to that elbow level. Like that. So now we're going to slash from the top down to the elbow level and then across to the edge of the sleeve. We're not going to go through this edge right here. So cut down through here. And then across to the side of the sleeve. And do not cut through all the way. So that we are going to be able to pivot this out like this. We're going to slash through this middle one as well. Now these are going to come from the middle out to this next line, but not through the next line. Here. And this one's going to come this way to here. So then this piece can now swing this way. See how that's working here? Now we're going to slash down this one and over, making sure that we don't accidentally cut into this guy right here. All right, so these are all my pieces. So they're attached here, it's attached here, here, and here. So now, if I zoom this out a little bit, now we can bring this out really far and swing these really far. Now with the Lego mutton sleeve, the sides kind of curve in over here. So when you start swinging this out really far, this is going to form an angle, but we don't want to actually sew an angle here. We're going to end up blending a curve to this edge right here. The height of this cap is also going to extend quite a bit further out than what we have here, and that's going to add that voluminous, dramatic shape to it. So you want to make sure you have enough paper here to tape all of this down. So I have my paper coming down to here, and I'm going to tape my pattern down nice and secure. Now for my side pieces, I'm going to bring these out kind of like this and tape these down. So on this upper half, we have this great big giant shape right here. So we're going to trace in these three sides, 1, 2, and 3. But for this edge right here, I want you to curve it a little bit. So I'm going to use my ruler to just draw a blended curve across this corner, like this. You want to have the same curve shape on the other side. We also want to keep this shape and this shape the same. Now here comes the fun part of the Lego mutton sleeve, and that is drawing this outer curve area. Now, we cannot just connect these in a straight line going across. We are going to have to establish in our own curve shape. This is going to be kind of like a balloon. And we do want to keep this area here, but we can start blending this line, clipping it across this corner right here, because these do point out pretty far that way, and we want to start working our way back this way. So I'm actually going to draw this, clipping about 1 inch or so of this off. Now, if you want to get real technical with this, you can give yourself some points to go towards. I'm going to bring this up about 3 3 inches. I'm aiming this way. I can actually go a little higher than that. So I'm going to swing this out this way. So I want to show you something to kind of help you with figuring out how big this should be. This is a Lego mutton sleeve pattern from the Victorian fashion patterns. These are taken from actual garments, but look at the shape of this sleeve. You can kind of see where this is that inside curve right here. There's an inside curve right here, and how big that upper edge is. These are for some very, very big sleeves, like this lady's right here. So don't be afraid to have, here's another one, have a really bulbous looking top edge of your Lego mutton sleeve. So if you think it looks big and ridiculous, you're probably on the right track. So I'm not too afraid of making this really big. Here's another balloon sleeve that looks a little bit like this guy. So you also, of course, want to sew this up into a mock-up to make sure that you like the shape that you're getting. So I'm going to bring this back down in here and blend it. Now you can pleat this sleeve, you can gather this sleeve, however you want to go about bringing this fullness back in. It is going to vary depending on your fabric, how you're going to be able to fit all this fullness in here. A very heavyweight fabric, you will most likely want to pleat it. If you have something lightweight, you can get away with gathering it all down. So now I'm going to take my pattern off and blend and finish up my lines. So here I just have to go back in and connect these up. My grain line is in the middle here. Now I'm going to put my notches to gather this up here and here, kind of where that underarm starts, because that is a lot of fabric that needs to be gathered up. So that is my Lego mutton sleeve pattern, and this is what it looks like when it is sewn up. And finally, we have our Lego mutton sleeve, which was sewn together very much like the sleeve that we had with the fullness on the top and nothing on the bottom. So it just had lots and lots of gathering stitches along the top edge. The underarm was just sewn together along that curve. It was clipped and then pressed open. So it's a fairly simple sleeve to put together, but it really can have a lot of different drama depending on how full you make this top edge. So right now I have it with nothing inside of it, but you can make this sit out really big if you stuff it with something. So case in point, here I've just thrown some batting on the inside of this sleeve. If you were doing this for a final garment, you would actually sew 2 sleeves and put the stuffing in the inside. You can use tulle, you can use batting, you can use other kinds of like loose, lightweight materials. Historically, some sleeves had supports in them with like wire in them and boning. So you can really get a very dramatic appearance using this Lego mutton sleeve style. So if you are interested in using this for your project, I do recommend that you pick a fabric that can be gathered down or pleated really closely and easily so that you can stitch through it. Really stiff fabrics are pretty difficult to get this loftiness to it, so a lighter weight material is going to work out better. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please give me a like and a comment if you've learned something today, and if there's any other topics that you would like me to cover. I do have a lot of stuff already recorded for my classes, so if it's something that I've already done, I'd be happy to share it with you all too. You can find more of my project information and progress on my Instagram, which is linked down below. That is the #1 spot to see what I'm doing lately. Coming up soon, I have a new video on creating the corset for my Helen costume, which has been a long time coming, and I cannot wait to share it with you. And I have more content coming up later on in the year with more pattern drafting and alteration. And I look forward to sharing more videos with you very soon. Have a wonderful day.